Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going, we're going underground. We're stepping into a philosophical basement, a world written during one of the most just agonizing years in literary history.
We're doing a deep dive into Fyodor Dostoevsky's scorching 1864 novella, Notes from Underground.
And the personal context here is, it's just staggering. You almost can't understand the book without it.
You really can't. Dostoevsky was 43. In April of 1864, his wife, Maria, dies of tuberculosis, a really slow, painful death.
And that's not all.
No. Just 3 months later, his brother Mikhail, who was his closest friend and collaborator, he also dies suddenly. And it leaves Dostoevsky with crushing debt from their failed magazine.
And here's the detail that just gets me every time. He wrote parts of this book, this very book, while literally sitting at his dying wife's bedside.
He was immersed in suffering, staring right into the chaos of life and death, and seeing that no rational system, no scientific formula could ever explain that.
And out of all that pain comes this narrator, the underground man.
He's 40. He lives in this squalid little basement room in St. Petersburg. And his first words to you, the reader, are, "I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man."
An unattractive man. He's deliberately repulsive.
Completely.
Yeah.
But you can't look away because he's speaking some kind of fundamental, if uncomfortable, truth about us.
And he didn't just, say something controversial. He basically launched a whole philosophical movement.
He really did. This short book it's pretty much seen as the first real work of existentialist literature. It's the DNA for Camus, for Sartre, for Kafka.
I mean, Nietzsche himself, who knew a thing or two about the dark parts of the human mind.
Right. Nietzsche called Dostoevsky the only psychologist from whom I have anything to learn. That's a serious endorsement.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out why this narrator, this sick, spiteful man, deliberately chooses misery over happiness.
And how that one single private decision became this devastating attack on the entire modern, rational, utopian worldview of his time.
To get there, we have to understand what he was so angry about. He's arguing with someone, isn't he?
He is. He's arguing against a very specific and wildly popular book that came out the year before. It's Nikolai Chernyshevsky's novel, What Is to Be Done.
And this wasn't just some popular novel. Our sources say this thing was like a political roadmap for a whole generation of Russian progressives.
It was. Lenin later said it was one of his most important influences. It was the absolute Bible of what you'd call rational utopianism.
Okay, so what's the core idea of that book?
It's actually stunningly simple. Chernyshevsky believed that humans are fundamentally rational beings. We're not driven by sin or some dark impulse, but by logical self-interest.
So if you just teach people what's good for them, they'll do it.
Inevitably. You show them, using science and reason, their true self-interest, and they will always choose the good, rational path. Society would just scientifically engineer itself into a perfect utopia.
Wait, so the answer to every human problem is just better data. You show someone the mathematically optimal path to happiness, and they'll just take it. Every single time.
That's the theory. Exactly.
Yeah.
The human is a machine that calculates for the greatest advantage. No room for spite, no room for error.
And this utopia even had a symbol.
It did. The famous Crystal Palace.
Right. This was a real place, wasn't it?
It was. A huge, transparent building made of iron and glass, built for the Great Exhibition in London in 1851. And it was the perfect metaphor for their world.
Flawless, logical, transparent, nowhere to hide.
And no reason to hide, because everything is perfect and rational.
So what does our underground man say to this beautiful, scientific, harmonious future?
He says, and this is the quote, "I rejected the Crystal Palace for one reason alone, because one would not be allowed to stick out one's tongue at it."
Huh. Just to be childish, to be spiteful.
Exactly. That one single pointless self-destructive gesture is the entire book in a nutshell. It makes no sense. It's not in his self-interest.
Yeah.
But it's the one thing that proves he is his own man, not a cog in a perfect machine.
Because in a perfect, predictable world, where is the choice? He says that you could shower a man with every blessing on earth, and he'll still play a dirty trick on purpose.
Right.
Just to prove he's a man and not a piano key.
And that's pure Dostoevsky, straight from his experience in the Siberian prison camps. He saw men who were irrational, self-destructive, but fiercely free in their own minds.
Yeah.
He realized that we value that freedom so much, we'll actively harm ourselves just to prove it exists.
Which brings us to this fear of being a piano key. to the most famous and I think most shocking part of the book, the math problem.
Yes, the threat of absolute certainty. The underground man says 2 times 2 equals 4. That is no longer life, but the beginning of death.
Okay, hold on. 2 plus 2 is 4. That's certainty. That's the ground we stand on. How is accepting a basic fact the beginning of death?
Well, for the thinkers Dostoevsky was fighting, 2 plus 2 is 4 wasn't just math. It represented a final, unchangeable law of the universe.
And their goal was to apply that kind of law to us, to human beings.
Precisely. The idea was that science would eventually get so good it could predict everything a person would do. Just like you can calculate the orbit of a planet.
All my choices are just the result of prior causes. They're predictable.
They're predictable. So if your actions are as certain as 2 plus 2 is 4, then your feeling of choice is just an illusion. You're just following a program.
I'm a piano key. Someone hits a note, the predetermined sound comes out. No free will, no soul.
That's the deterministic threat. Think about it today. What if an AI could predict, with 100% accuracy, everything you're going to do tomorrow? Where is the you in that? Where is the choice?
The feeling of being human just vanishes, so the only way to fight back is to be irrational.
That is it. That's his only escape. His desperate, crazy response is to just shout from his basement, 2 plus 2 equals 5.
Knowing it's wrong. Knowing it makes no sense.
He knows it's wrong. But by embracing the illogical 5, he is proving, just to himself, that he is human, that he has free will. It's the only proof he has left.
So he's choosing suffering, choosing error, just to make sure he's still a person who gets to choose freedom as a form of self-destruction.
And what's so brilliant is that Dostoevsky uses this idea as the foundation for all his great novels, this idea of freedom being a crushing burden. It leads directly to the Grand Inquisitor in the Brothers Karamazov, who says humanity can't actually bear true freedom.
The underground man is the living proof of that argument.
He is. He's suffocating under the weight of it.
Okay, so it's one thing to have these debates in your head in a basement, but what happens when this theory crashes into another human being?
Right. And that's the whole second half of the book. He leaves the echo chamber.
It starts with this absolutely disastrous dinner with some old schoolmates.
Oh, it's just agonizing to read. So relatable. He hates them. He thinks they're shallow. But at the same time, he is desperate for them to think he's impressive.
And, of course, it ends in total humiliation. He's ignored, insulted. It just reinforces his whole view of himself as this wretched outcast.
And in a fit of rage and shame, he follows them to a brothel. And that is where he meets Liza.
A young prostitute.
Yes. And he does something that, on the surface, seems almost heroic. He gives her this long, emotional speech about her terrible fate.
Right. He paints this picture of her getting sick and being thrown out and contrasts it with, a warm family life. And she's genuinely moved. She cries.
She believes he's trying to save her. But then comes the twist, the brutal psychological self-awareness.
He realizes something mid-speech, doesn't he?
He realizes his words are all borrowed from books. He's not actually trying to save her soul. He's just performing. He's playing the hero to see if he can, to test his power over her emotions.
Wow, so it was all a game.
A power play, which is why he completely panics when a few days later she actually shows up at his miserable little basement room.
Because now the performance has to meet reality. She's going to see the real him, not the literary hero.
Exactly. The powerless, pathetic man. And so he lashes out with just unbelievable cruelty.
He tells her it was all a lie, that he was mocking her.
Yeah.
And then he sort of breaks down himself, doesn't he? He confesses, they made me this way. I cannot be good.
He does. And in that moment, Liza does something incredible, something unearned.
She doesn't run away.
No. She understands his pain, his humiliation, and she embraces him, holds him, offers him genuine, unconditional human compassion.
Just salvation. It's right there. And he rejects it.
He rejects it.
Why? Why push away the one thing that could save him?
Because of what he calls his diseased self-consciousness. It's not just pride. It's this pathological need to analyze every single motive until he's paralyzed.
So to accept her love would mean what?
It would mean he has to admit he's helpless, that he's someone who needs to be saved, and his spiteful, autonomous pride just cannot stand that. He can't surrender control, even to be happy.
So he'd rather stay in control of his own misery than be happy but dependent on someone else.
That's it. So he shoves money at her, turning this sacred moment back into a transaction.
Forcing her away.
And she, with so much more dignity, just throws the money on the table and leaves. He doesn't go after her. He chooses the basement.
So what's the big takeaway from this deep dive? What does it all mean?
I think the core tension is this war inside all of us, right?
Yeah.
The fight between our rational self-interest, the crystal palace, the logical choice, and this messy, painful, destructive need for real, authentic free will.
And it's interesting to contrast this ending with, say, Crime and Punishment, which he writes just 2 years later.
It's basically the same setup with a different outcome. Raskolnikov, another alienated intellectual, also meets a prostitute, Sonia, who accepts him.
But Raskolnikov makes the other choice. He takes her hand, he accepts the suffering, and moves toward redemption.
He does. The underground man. He ends with a question mark. He's still down there, arguing, clinging to his pain because it's the only thing that's truly his.
So the final thought Dostoevsky leaves us with, and I think it's more relevant than ever, is this. If freedom is this heavy and we're willing to destroy ourselves, to shout that 2 + 2 = 5, just to prove we're not machines, how much of our own rational self-interest, our own happiness are we rejecting today just for the pure, spiteful satisfaction of feeling truly dangerously free? That's a question you can really only think about from the underground.